Here's another one that came out of our Florida Lawn Care Nuts Facebook group. This relates back to exactly what I was talking about at the very beginning of the podcast, but this is great. We're going to bring this up again because I want to hammer this home. So in Florida, we're coming off of the wettest season of the year. Now, if you live on the east coast of Florida, you're coming off 2 super wet seasons. They got destroyed last year, records. And I don't know if this year's a record on the east coast of Florida, but it is definitely a heavy rain year. West coast of Florida, record rains, heavy rains. He says here, Joseph says, I have some fungus from a swale zone holding water from our crazy 9 inches of rain last week. He got 9 inches last week. I don't think he says where he's at. He's in Florida, though. I don't know what else to treat the area with. I hit it with Headway G, and then I sprayed Eagle 20 EW last week. That's 2 different fungicides. That was a good plan. He goes, I'm not really sure what else to do. And what you can see is the corner of the lawn that borders the sidewalk and his mulch beds is all brown. And what that is, it's not necessarily fungus. Yes, there is probably some fungus there, probably some gray leaf spot. But that's not really the main thing that is causing this. And again, for those of you on YouTube, you will be able to see the video version of this. I should see if I can put video versions up everywhere else, like on Spotify or whatever. But on YouTube, on Lawns Across America, you will see this clearly. This corner is exactly what I talked about in the previous part of the podcast, where what he has is root washout. The grass is actually etiolated or thinned out, etiolated. That's a great word taught to us by Cassie many years ago. But etiolated means thinned out. And the grass, because it doesn't have roots to tack itself down, it can't knit together tight. That's what roots do, by the way. The stolons all knit together, but when they all root in together, it gets pulled together tight. Those roots and those stolons, they knit together and they pull together tight. I want you to think of a bodybuilder flexing his pecs. That's everything's pulling together, right? You can just feel that. Well, when the grass is washed out, when the roots are literally washed out, and Joe, I'm talking to Joe here that left the Facebook post, I bet if you go out there, I bet that grass will pull up really easy. I bet it's not even really well rooted, especially the closer you get down to that corner. And that is because that flowing water, that's constant standing water there, and he even says it's a swale zone. The water flows right across there. It just washes the roots right out. There is absolutely nothing you can do about that. The only thing that I would do, if I could, if you're not in a blackout zone, is I'd put down some foliar absorb nitrogen, because that will just help to green it up, which is what I really mostly care about. But it is a good idea to give this grass some nitrogen. Everybody gets so scared. Even if there's a little bit of disease in there, I don't care. Think about this. When you get sick, when you get a disease, do you stop eating? No, what do? You take more vitamins, man. You make sure you're getting all of your 3 hots in a cot. You know, you feed a cold sun. You know, and so I'm not telling you to dose this lawn with massive amounts of nitrogen, but maybe like quarter pound, 1/3 pound of nitrogen foliar applied. Man, that would be good. Just really help that out. And I think that would help it to kind of make its way through until things dry up, and then the stolons will tack back down. They'll root back in. But that's what that is. So while I do think there's some disease there, it's not about applying more fungicides. This is really about time. And one of those things where the weather is just going to win. The weather is undefeated. And when we have, like he got 9 inches of rain last week, think about all the water flow. It's a swale. It's an area that's flowing to a swale. So think about 9 inches of water that fell, and all of the water from his house on this side of the house is collecting and flowing across this area. That's a lot of water flow. Water flow cut the Grand Canyon, broskies. You know what I mean? So if it'll cut the Grand Canyon, it'll definitely cut the roots out of your St. Augustine grass. And that is exactly what we're seeing here. So if you're in Florida, and I hope you'll share this clip of this video, if you're in Florida and you have these areas that are brown like this on corners, it's probably due to water flow, and there really is no need to apply anything except maybe some foliar applied nitrogen if you're not in a blackout zone, or if you're hearing this and it's October 1st or after. I'll give you links in the description below. We actually have a new product coming out that's perfect for this. It's called In Charge. Well, it's not perfect for this, but it's good for this. It would work for this. Actually, 700 Green Effect would actually be perfect for this. But either way, something foliar applied. Even 501 spoon juice is foliar absorbed. I'll give you some links to it. That's all you got to do. And you spray it on the whole lawn, by the way, not just the damaged area. You spray it on the whole lawn. Maybe you go a little heavier handed in the damaged area, give it a little bit more good stuff. But pretty normal here in Florida, and it's just one of those environmental things that you really can't hedge against. You just have to kind of deal with it and hope for the best.
This is the east side Citra Blue St. Augustine grass. Looking great, hasn't had any nitrogen, you know, since June 1st. Well, really early May is when I actually did it. And it could use some. This is what it looks like after having been hit with the Command topsoil. We'll talk about that down the road. But in this video, I've also been talking about wet feed areas and what St. Augustine grass looks like when it's overly wet. This is a perfect example of that. I'm looking at a field of beautiful St. Augustine grass, but right in front of me, there's some areas that are brown. And these are areas that I know because I document. These are areas that have been holding water for a long time. When I say a long time, I mean for a few days at a time. They've been literally underwater. The reason I know that is because I haven't been able to mow. I've been coming out here checking, and there's always a bunch of standing water here to the point where I can't mow. And so this is what's happened. Some of the St. Augustine has died out because it's just too wet. And so you can look down in here and it looks, and what people will say, well, that must be disease. But what I'm just looking at is there's a lot of green St. Augustine grass in here, but in between, a lot of it has died. And as you guys will remember, I tell you the growth nature of St. Augustine grass are long, thick stolons. And those long, thick stolons weave together to create this dense mat of turf. On the flip side of that, when St. Augustine grass dies, I'm trying to pull out a stolon as we do this, but the Citra Blue stolons are extremely stoloniferous. They are so thick. Anyway, when those stolons are all woven together and one dies, it makes this kind of strange looking pattern that you could think, well, that's disease because it's this weird looking shape. But really what that brown weird looking shape is, it's just stolons that were all woven together. One of those died. And so you're seeing it reveal in these strange woven patterns that look like disease, but really it's just a stolon that died from too much water. The other thing is they thin out when there's too much water. They just tend to thin out because they're not growing. So some die, some thin out. Etiolation is the term. Anyway, you can see brown areas that I'm looking at, and this is not disease, nothing to do with that. It's just wet feet. There's another one over here I'll show you. Wait, here's another area, been holding water, and it just has this brown tinge to it. I mean, you can probably see on the camera, it's a low spot anyway, but it's been holding water. And you know, I've got just lots of other areas that I could point out all around the track where the St. Augustine is brown like this that have been holding water for several weeks now. And so that's what you're gonna get. And a lot of you are seeing various results of this in your lawn. Maybe you don't have it like this where we literally had 2.5 or 3 weeks of just standing water there. Maybe you didn't have it that bad, but you had a little bit lesser than this, but you still had a lot more water and you lost some areas. What I'm saying is a lot of this is just from the rainy season. The weather is undefeated. The weather always wins. So, all right, well, we were talking about it. Here I am now on the west side. Same Citra Blue St. Augustine grass, just the other side of the track. We've always had problems with water over here. They have been bad this year, and we've actually got full on loss on this side. So whereas on the other side, we just had stress and some areas dying and thinning out. And by the way, to expand on why does it thin out, the reason it thins out is because it's in a situation where its growth has been interrupted. It's the same with shade. Think about with shade. What happens when grass gets in the shade? It thins out, right? And the reason it does that is because it's like, oh, we can't support these big fat plants. There's not enough sunlight. So what we'll do is we'll thin out and we'll try to just survival of the fittest. So we don't have to support these giant plants. So because we have less sunlight, right? Well, the same is when it's in water. When the feet are wet and it's in water and it can no longer operate because I don't know what it's called, but whenever the soil's just too wet, it just can't grow, right? There's a balance there. So whenever it's too wet for too long, it can't grow. So it's like, well, this seems like it's going to go for a long time. It's been a couple weeks. We've been in wet feet. Let's do this. Let's thin out these big plants. Let's thin out so maybe just a few of us can survive through till when the conditions improve, right? So that's kind of what it is. You know, the flooding will continue until morale improves or something like that. So anyway, it's still, this area is actually still pretty wet.
It's still actually very wet over here. This soil is soaked. So it still hasn't dried out at all, even after 3 days.
And it even smells sour, you can just tell. Ugh. But over there, that soil is sufficiently dry to where, again, I can mow, of course, but the grass hasn't died. But over here, there it is, wet St. Augustine grass, not disease, just areas that stayed wet too long from wet feet. So there you go, there's the update from the Freedom Factory. As we're out here, the Northbridge Bermuda is looking beautiful. I did 50% Command topsoil and 20 tons of sand, leveling sand out there. Still got to put the video together for that. But that Bermuda, and I've been mowing it with the zero turn right here with unsharp blades. It still looks great. I'll show it to you behind my back. The zoysia back there, the Citra Blue, Citra zoysia, the Citra zoy, it's almost all dead. That whole area is flooded. So ever since we had Irma, was it Irma? Debbie. Irma was many years ago. Debbie, ever since Debbie came through, that dropped like 20 inches of water in 24, 48 hours, something like that. This, you saw the video Cletus did where he was out there, you know, playing around in the flood and stuff. Well, over here it flooded as well. It did drain out eventually, but what it did when it did that is it lowered a lot of places. Like a lot of these places that were not sunken are now sunken. And so it's gotten to a point where there's not, like, I can't just go put in a drain or two. It's like, put French drains in. No, we need somebody out here that actually understands stormwater management. Because the whole topography of the area around here has also changed. The water flow from all the places around us that used to be farms that are not farms anymore, I'm sure that's changed where the water goes. There's also a giant concrete pad in the middle here that wasn't originally in here that changes the way water flows, and this is just a giant bowl. So it gets to a point where they need somebody that's a specialist, an engineer, to come in here and understand how to control that. So the zoysia over there has suffered and it's not going to come back. I mean, literally that's a whole pit of mud over there. You can't drive on it or walk on it or anything. So they got a sump in there that they're trying to sump it out to get it to the drains. So anyway, St. Augustine looking great, Bermuda looking great. Even though the St. Augustine does have some low spots that it didn't have before, it's still okay. It's not anything that it can't get through. It's just these few brown areas that we're gonna monitor, but it's fine. Bermuda over there, perfect. No drainage issues. So really blessed that backstretch Bermuda, Northbridge Bermuda, it drains perfectly. Man, it does good. So we got the good news here. We got good news and we got challenging news with the lawn. So, all right, I'm gonna finish enjoying the mow because that's how I roll.